8. Iman Fondren and Rebecca Martinez. San Antonio police officer Iman Fondren was married when he began a steamy affair with his coworker Rebecca Martinez in 2015. They went to great lengths to conceal their torrid entanglement, especially since Martinez's ex-boyfriend was also a cop who worked for the same department. But they failed to cover their tracks well enough to prevent Fondren's wife from discovering text messages between the pair about their on-duty encounters, including a quickie in the Home Depot parking lot. She turned over 160 pages of messages to Fondren's superiors, and both he and Martinez were fired as a result. Fondren and Martinez claimed that the text messages weren't about actual encounters, and that they were merely detailed fantasies. The pair allegedly disabled their GPS and purposely failed to turn on their patrol cameras during their clandestine meetups. After being tipped off by Fondren's wife, investigators placed tracking devices on the officers' patrol cars. Martinez was accused of taunting Fondren's wife by taking photos of her in jail after having her arrested for assault and using the department's software to run background checks on the woman without a valid reason. Her lawyer argued that Fondren's wife embellished the details of the conflict with Martinez as a form of revenge against her husband's mistress. Fondren and Martinez both tried to get their jobs back, but the decision to fire them was upheld. 7. Amanda Steele. In 2017, authorities in Butte County, Idaho, received a call from a man who reported hearing rumors about his daughter-in-law, who happened to be a schoolteacher, suspiciously hanging out with young men at her home. Law enforcement began investigating 34-year-old schoolteacher Amanda Steele, but it stalled when her alleged victims gave vague answers during questioning and declined to go into detail about the nature of their relationship with the teacher. In 2019, Steele's husband at the time claimed that he'd caught her in their hot tub with a teenager. He told police that he'd known a lot more about his wife's questionable behavior than he'd originally let on because he was focused on saving his marriage. Investigators brought suspected victims back in for questioning, and this time around, at least one of them admitted to having inappropriate contact with Steele and skipping school to go see her. In the end, Steele was arrested for her disturbing conduct. She ended up pleading guilty to 2 felony counts of injury to a child and was sentenced to 3 months in jail, followed by 7 years of probation. 6. Ignasio Garros and Shauna Nelson. Shauna Bunce met her future husband, police officer Ken Nelson, while working as a 911 dispatcher in Weld County, Colorado in 1995. The couple married the following year and went on to have 2 children. But by the time Weld County and the town of Greenlee combined their 911 operations in 2004, Shauna and Ken's marriage had hit a slump. So it was like a breath of fresh air when Shauna met Greenlee police detective Ignasio Garros, who was also married and experiencing a low point in his relationship. Shauna and Ignasio opened up to each other about their frustrations with their spouses, and they quickly went from being a shoulder for one another to lean on to secret lovers who shared an intense mutual attraction. About a year into the affair, Ken read Shauna's diary and discovered that she was cheating on him. He told her he wanted a divorce, and Shauna moved out. The affair with Ignasio continued, but he wanted to stay married to his wife, Heather, even after Shauna became pregnant with his child in 2005. Shauna refused to get an abortion at her lover's urging and instead tried reconciling with Ken, who was surprisingly accepting of her pregnancy with another man. But Shauna wasn't completely over Ignasio, and she blamed Heather Garros for their affair ending. Ignasio wasn't only done with Shauna, he signed his rights away to their baby, who Ken planned to raise as his own. Afraid that Shauna would try blackmailing him, Ignasio decided to get one step ahead by confessing to Heather about his affair. This way, Shauna couldn't hold it against him, since Heather already knew. Shauna nevertheless continued to leave the Garroses threatening voicemails, and she'd harass them in other ways. Feeling powerless and abandoned, Shauna approached Heather outside her workplace one day. She then ordered the victim to get down on her knees and shot her twice in the head. Anyone familiar with the ongoing drama knew right away that Shauna was the shooter. She was convicted of first-degree murder and was sentenced to life in prison without parole, leaving Ken behind to raise their family on his own. 5. Jessica Mishali. Criminal defense attorney Jessica Mishali's integrity was called into question in 2016 when a guard at the Broward County Jail in Florida accused her of being intimate with an inmate. In a report, Corrections Deputy B.A. Jean-Pierre claimed that she passed by an attorney interview room and saw Mishali going at it with her client, 26-year-old Israel Granda, who was accused of attempted murder. Jean-Pierre described seeing Mishali bent over at a table with Granda behind her, and included a few other details that are better left unsaid. Mishali, who was married at the time, insisted that the allegation was false and that she and Granda were on opposite sides of the table throughout their entire meeting. In fact, Mishali argued that it wouldn't have been possible for them to be doing anything inappropriate because the doors have large windows and deputies check on the rooms frequently. The attorney claimed that she was set up because Granda had agreed to cooperate in a jail contraband investigation involving guards who were smuggling cell phones to inmates in exchange for a profit. According to Mishali, the jail's top investigators were eager to work with her client and find out what he knew. But what was even more suspicious was that the allegation of inappropriate conduct came on Granda's very first day back at the Broward jail, after spending several months at a separate facility due to safety concerns. Mishali told WPLG News that she believed the accusers wanted to isolate Granda and ruin his credibility, so any information he turned over during the investigation would seem questionable. A few months after the allegation surfaced, jail staff accused Mishali of helping Granda smuggle phones into the jail. She denied the accusation and said that 8 out of the 9 phones her client had been caught with were smuggled into the jail before she even knew him. This wasn't the first time Mishali's interactions with Granda were questioned. When Granda was previously held in Miami-Dade County, some guards accused Mishali of spending too much time with him and dressing inappropriately. When asked about this, she said she'd spent a lot of time with Granda because he had a complex criminal case. Just 3 weeks before the allegations at Broward surfaced, however, Mishali had been let go from Florida's Office of Criminal Conflict and Regional Counsel, and it supposedly had something to do with her representation of Granda. She didn't want to comment on her termination, but has never wavered from maintaining her innocence. Moving forward, she's only allowed to interact with Granda through a plexiglass window, which she said had a limiting effect on her ability to prepare for his trial. The truth of what did or didn't happen may never be known, but Mishali appears to have moved on from it and continues to practice law. 4. Tragic workplace love triangle. Most people know that it's a bad idea to get involved with a married coworker, especially if that person's spouse also works for the same employer. But it didn't stop 31-year-old Donald Gino from having an affair with the wife of 43-year-old Damian DeRusha while the three were working as county employees in Volusia, Florida. DeRusha discovered the illicit relationship after planting a recording device in his wife's car. Then, one day in February 2021, he told his boss he had to take care of a family issue and asked for some personal leave time. And during that time off, he calmly approached Gino at a vehicle maintenance facility and fired 8 rounds at his romantic rival. 3 of the bullets struck Gino in the back and face, causing injuries that would soon lead to his death. After the murder, DeRusha texted his wife and told her what he'd done. Police found him sitting in his truck, and during questioning, he admitted to losing his mind and shooting Gino. Witnesses described DeRusha as calm and collected as he pumped bullets into his coworker. Even after Gino collapsed to the ground, he fired the gun one more time. Resigned to the fate he'd just chosen, DeRusha then set the gun down next to Gino before going back and sitting in his vehicle until police arrived. During his trial, Darusha argued that Gino had gotten violent and that he acted in self-defense. He claimed he wasn't upset about the affair and that he'd simply planned to tell Gino to stop seeing his wife. He said that Gino had swung a wrench at him, initiating the fight. And while testifying in his own defense, Darusha claimed that he didn't remember pulling the trigger. But in the end, a jury convicted him of first-degree murder, and he was sentenced to life in prison without parole. He had no criminal history prior to the senseless killing that he threw his freedom away for. 3. Kamisha Block and Paul Brandon Norris. 20-year-old United States Army Specialist Kamisha Block was shot to death in August 2007 while serving in Iraq. The military initially claimed that Block died from a single gunshot wound to the chest in a tragic case of friendly fire. But the injuries to Kamisha's body told a different story. She'd been struck by 5 bullets, including at least one in the head, by her boyfriend and squad leader, Staff Sergeant Paul Brandon Norris, who then turned the gun on himself. Over the years, witnesses slowly came forward as the family tried to figure out what happened. They revealed that Block's relationship with Norris was forbidden due to a policy that banned personnel of different ranks from dating each other. But people could tell there was something going on between the two, especially with the way they argued frequently. At least one soldier reported the toxic relationship, and he later told 12 News Now that the situation was swept under the rug. During that same time period, people reportedly grew concerned about Norris's seemingly unstable mental health. One witness recalled seeing Norris being restrained by his superior just hours before Kamisha was killed. The young woman's family continues to languish without answers, as the circumstances surrounding Kamisha's death remain shrouded in mystery. Her loved ones believe that more could have been done to prevent her death, especially since high-ranking personnel knew about the relationship between her and Norris. They're also upset that the military initially provided inaccurate and vague details about the murder, including its failure to disclose that Norris was the killer. The investigation into Kamisha's death was reopened in 2019, but it doesn't seem to be going anywhere, leaving her family and friends with no choice but to draw their own conclusions based on the information that's available to them. 2. Thomas Lowe. Married divorce attorney Thomas Lowe began an affair with a client in 2011, just days after agreeing to represent her in her divorce from her husband. During a phone call, Lowe asked the woman about how things were in the bedroom with her soon-to-be ex and propositioned her for intimacy. The affair began a month later and carried on for several months before Lowe decided that he wanted to try saving his ailing marriage. He broke things off with his mistress in 2012 and withdrew from representing her in her divorce case. But feeling wronged by Lowe, the woman told authorities about the affair. Lowe initially denied the illicit relationship, but eventually admitted to everything. Investigators discovered that on dates when the attorney and his mistress were intimate, Lowe billed the woman for legal services. And on the invoice, he listed the time as meetings or drafting memos. Based on his $250 per hour fee and the amounts he charged, most of these meetings were extremely short, with one session lasting just 12 minutes. Altogether, Lowe billed his client around $900 for periods of time that included intimacy. As a result, in early 2013, state authorities suspended Lowe's license to practice law for a minimum of 15 months. And now for number 1. But if you want to hear more bizarre and crazy stories, stay tuned after the video for some more content. 1. Timothy Henderson. Oklahoma City Judge Timothy Henderson resigned from his position in early 2021 after 3 women accused him of misconduct. Around the same time, the defense attorneys of an accused murderer named Robert Leon Hashigan III noticed that Henderson showed a concerning level of favoritism toward the prosecution with his decisions throughout the trial. Attorney Benjamin Munda later told Fox 25 that the judge's treatment toward him and co-counsel Clay Curtis was so unusual that it caused the lawyers to wonder why they were being treated so unfairly. Munda said that Henderson had allowed the prosecution to present prejudicial evidence at the very beginning of the case that risked having the effect of tainting the jury against the defense in unfair ways. So, not surprisingly, Hashigan was found guilty of first-degree murder and was sentenced to life in prison. Munda and Curtis eventually realized that Henderson was sleeping with the prosecutor. After word of the affair spread, an appeals court overturned Hashigan's conviction and sent the case back to the negotiating table to see if the parties could work out a plea agreement or if it would be retried. Following Henderson's resignation and the damning allegations that came along with it, the outcomes of hundreds of past criminal cases were called into question. The nature of the judge's relationship with the prosecutor was also unclear, with the prosecutor claiming Henderson abused her. But there's always two sides to every story, and Henderson insisted that their interactions were consensual. Investigators ultimately decided that there wasn't enough evidence to bring criminal charges against Henderson, but the scandal led to the proposal of a new bill for a state law. The law would make it illegal for judges to have intimate interactions with lawyers who appear before them. Violating the appropriately named Judge Timothy R. Henderson Act would come with a fine of anywhere between $5,000 and $100,000, as well as a possible prison term of up to 2 years.
8. Panic mode. An Alabama mother went into panic mode at the Miami-Dade International Airport in late 2022 when her children disappeared. 25-year-old Camilla McMillie went viral online after a video of her altercation with airport employees was posted on Twitter, Reddit, and TikTok. The woman was checking in for her American Airlines flight to New York City after missing a previous flight when everything spiraled out of control. Police in Miami reported that Camilla became irate and began to scream when her 2 kids walked away from her without telling her they were going to the bathroom. She immediately started to panic, thinking her children had just vanished into thin air. But what happened next was an extreme overreaction. While hysterically searching for her kids, she demanded that a gate agent assist her. And according to investigators, Camilla escalated things to an unreasonable level when she pulled a machine that reads boarding passes off of a counter, damaging both the equipment and the surrounding area. Afterward, Camilla grabbed a computer monitor and chucked it at the gate agent, striking her in the shoulder. The situation was finally calmed down after U.S. Customs and Border Protection officers arrived at the scene. They held Camilla in custody until police arrived to formally arrest her. The police affidavit stated that she caused more than $10,000 in damages and that she bruised the gate agent's right shoulder during the incident. Camilla, who lives in Alabama, was charged with several crimes, including criminal mischief, disorderly conduct, and aggravated battery. She's currently being held in jail on a $13,000 bond. 7. Banned from Bushwick Deli. In late 2018, a man was detained by police officers in New York after throwing a violent fit over a bagel sandwich at a deli in Brooklyn. 24-year-old Edilberto Burgos was arrested at his Bed-Stuy apartment over a month after he attacked the clerk at a Bushwick Deli on November 25th. Based on what officers told the New York Post, he was charged with menacing and assault as a result. Edilberto had previously been arrested for petty larceny in early 2015. In February 2012, he was also arrested for having a loaded firearm in his possession. In footage from the altercation, Edilberto can be heard demanding a cinnamon-toasted raisin bagel with bacon, egg, and cheese right effing now. And as he rudely ordered his food, he slammed his fist down on the counter glass. 28-year-old deli worker Sanjay Patel told NBC New York that Edilberto lost it when he was told he'd have to wait 5 to 10 minutes for his bagel due to the number of orders they were already working on. In the 30-second freak-out clip, the man shouted Sanjay specifically, telling him what a big mistake it was to make him wait. And when Sanjay attempts to calm Edilberto down, it only enrages the already irate customer more. And he can be heard yelling, "I don't want to listen," before demanding once again that his order be made immediately. Sanjay then gets pelted with a bag of bread before the video cuts off. The worker told reporters that Edilberto threatened to come back to the deli at a later time and shoot him. He also threw a metal stand and a tablet computer at Sanjay's head, along with a shopping basket. But at this point, Sanjay had had enough of the abusive customer, so he called the police, prompting Idalberto to flee the scene. What's even worse about the whole thing is that he didn't even get his breakfast before jumping into a parked car outside the deli. When officers and an ambulance finally arrived, Sanjay was transported to the hospital to be treated for swelling and bruising where the objects had hit him. The whole ordeal was quite traumatizing for the deli worker, and he told reporters that when he goes to sleep at night, he still dreams about it. Unfortunately, there's been no recent updates on the case, and it's unclear if Idalberto ever received sentencing for his crimes. 6. Road rage. In early 2023, a road rage incident resulted in a man being shot multiple times in Fort Worth, Texas. According to police reports, the ordeal occurred at around 10:40 p.m. on January 27th. Two drivers were heading down East Magnolia Avenue between the intersections of Hemphill Street and South Main Street. Then there was some type of exchange or verbal altercation between the men. The driver occupying the suspect's vehicle escalated things when he pulled out a gun and shot the victim 3 times in the forearm, shoulder, and face. There was apparently more than one person in the suspect's car, but immediately after the shooting, they fled the scene. Amazingly, even though he was badly injured, the victim was able to drive himself to the Quick Trip located on Hemphill Street, where he sought medical assistance before being transported to the hospital. Local news stations reported that aggressive drivers and road rage are a problem that many drivers in Fort Worth have experienced. Native resident Ashley Dargai told 5NBC that she mostly feels bullied on the road. Nicole Hendley of Fort Worth reported that dealing with aggressive drivers has become especially nerve-wracking, especially since becoming a parent. Based on reports from the local police, the victim, who hasn't been named, was transported to Harris Hospital for medical treatment. Luckily, they were able to treat his wounds and is currently in stable condition. At the moment, the suspect is still at large, and the case will continue to be investigated by the Gun Violence Unit. 5. Petty argument. A father and daughter from Washington State got into a heated argument over installing a baby gate, and it ended with deadly consequences in June 2019. 68-year-old Wendell Wilson was accused of shooting Lisa Wilson, his 38-year-old daughter, multiple times at the home they share in Renton, just outside of Seattle. In charging documents that were obtained by K13 News, prosecuting attorneys from King County said that the elderly man shot his daughter 6 times, striking her twice in the head just mere feet away from the woman's 13-month-old son. Prosecutors claimed that Wendell executed his adult daughter over a petty argument about a baby gate, somehow becoming triggered by the situation. The Renton police apparently told the Seattle Times that Wendell said the fight stemmed over whether the gate would fit in the kitchen. Then things only escalated from there, and the two got into each other's faces before things got crazy. That day, at 4:30 p.m. on June 10th, Wendell called his ex-wife and told her he planned to kill Lila and hung up, only to call her a couple of minutes later to confess that he'd shot their daughter to death. When officers arrived at the scene, the 68-year-old waived his Miranda rights, confessing to investigators right away, saying, "Got my gun and I shot her." Wendell didn't have a history of violent crimes before that day, but his willingness to stoop to lethal violence in order to settle a trivial dispute proved the grave risk he presented to the rest of the community, according to prosecutors. Wilson was arrested after confessing to the violent crime, and he was charged with first-degree murder. He was held in jail on a $2 million bond, but the outcome of the case is unclear. 4. New Mexico man is McWrong. In another case involving someone overreacting about food, a man from New Mexico pulled a gun on a drive-thru worker at McDonald's after receiving the wrong order in early 2021. Law enforcement in New Mexico took a man into custody after he threatened a McDonald's worker with a firearm in the drive-thru. The suspect was apparently upset about a mistake in his fast food order, and in response he pulled a gun on the employee. According to a local news station, KOB4, the ordeal occurred at an Albuquerque McDonald's in January 2021. The suspect, who was later identified as Esteban Gonzalez, reportedly pulled up to the drive-thru window so that he could complain about an issue with his order. In response, the workers at the establishment replaced his meal, free of charge. However, this wasn't enough for the man, so he got back in line, and when he pulled up to the window, he pointed a gun at the employee. This prompted the McDonald's workers to call the police, and when they arrived on the scene, Esteban drove off. They didn't let him get away though, and a police helicopter followed him until officers caught up and arrested him. When they were taking him into custody, Esteban told the officers that he was only trying to get a hamburger. He was subsequently booked into the Metropolitan Detention Center. The Albuquerque Journal reported that prosecutors filed a motion to detain Esteban until his trial. As a result of his actions, he was charged with aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. Unfortunately, the outcome of the case is unclear. 3. Karen visits Victoria's Secret. In mid-2021, a woman named Ijeoma Ukenta had a bizarre encounter with another woman named Abigail Elpick in a Victoria's Secret store at a mall in New Jersey. Abigail, a white woman, had a full-blown meltdown in the store and tried to attack Ijeoma, who's black. Her behavior only worsened when Ijeoma pulled out her phone to record her. The incident took place at the Short Hills Mall. Ijeoma began recording her interactions with Abigail after she was pushed out of the way as she was trying to browse the store's lingerie collection. After pulling out her phone to document the altercation, Abigail charged at her multiple times with her hand open as if she planned to strike her. But upon noticing her behavior was being recorded, she had a full breakdown. Instead of just leaving the store, Abigail decided to scream at Ijeoma, and at one point she even pretended to faint, lying on the store in front of the establishment's registers. In a separate video of the same altercation, Abigail can be heard demanding that Ijeoma stop videotaping her, yelling, "Get away from me," as she chased Ijeoma around the store. And you might think it couldn't get any worse than this, but it can, and it does. Ijeoma asked a Victoria's Secret employee to call for security at this point, and shortly after, more security arrived at the store. But apparently, the mall cop couldn't handle the situation to her liking, so Abigail called the Millburn Police Department and they were dispatched to the scene. However, officers treated the ordeal with little to no concern. They even informed Ijeoma that despite Abigail's actions and violent behavior, they couldn't escort her out of the complex. Because Abigail was the one who called the officers, her statement was taken first, and she claimed to have had a panic attack when she noticed she was being recorded. She told the officers she was scared of being professionally or socially shunned for her embarrassing behavior. Abigail was trying to make it seem like Ijeoma was only recording because she was having a panic attack, making it seem like she was the victim in the scenario. And as a result, Ijeoma filed a complaint against the two responding officers for making her feel unprotected, as she had all the proof in the world that she was doing what was justified and they ignored it. After the incident, she pursued legal action against Abigail, the Millburn Police Department, and more security, even setting up a GoFundMe page so that her social media followers could help assist her in the cause. In October 2022, it was reported that she'd raised over $100,000 to defend herself, but not much else is known about her legal battle. 2. Drug-induced psychosis. In Medford, Australia, a university student took LSD in July 2020 and became psychotic before murdering his girlfriend, believing she was a demon. 20-year-old Jordan Brody Miller violently attacked his girlfriend of 2 years, 18-year-old Emerald Wardle, when he suffered from delusions while under the influence of the hallucinogenic drug. Sadly, this was the man's first episode of psychosis, and although the LSD's effects were temporary, they were definitely acting upon him when he killed Emerald. Jordan confessed to strangling the 18-year-old, but he pleaded not guilty to murdering her, claiming that he'd been in a psychotic state and didn't harm her intentionally. By claiming this, he thought he couldn't be criminally responsible for his actions. However, after a jury deliberated for 12 hours following his 2-week trial, they found him guilty of murder, and they rejected his claims that the killing was only caused by his undiagnosed schizophrenia. Lee Carr SC, Crown Prosecutor, argued that Jordan's use of drugs and the lack of evidence that he suffered from a psychotic illness pointed at the murder being drug-induced. This meant that Jordan was guilty because he chose to do drugs out of his own free will, consequently ending in Emerald Wardle's death. Even though Jordan may have legitimately believed that Emerald was a demon during his psychotic break, it didn't excuse his actions. In the end, he was sentenced to serve 20 years behind bars. He'll only be eligible for parole after 13 years. 1. Deadly typo. A 35-year-old Colorado resident fatally shot his former boss over a typo on his paycheck in October 2022. The man in question was identified by the Aurora Police Department as Lloyd Clifford Love. He's now facing charges of first-degree murder after shooting and killing 52-year-old Marvin Johnson. On Thursday, October 20th, the incident took place outside of American Eagle Protective Services, the business Johnson owned. The shooting was the result of a heated dispute between employer and employee. Officers were called to the scene at around 7 p.m. after receiving reports of trespassing, which later was upgraded to a reported shooting as they were on their way to the property. They arrived to find Johnson on the floor with gunshot wounds to his body and face. Emergency responders and officers attempted to revive the victim, but their efforts were unsuccessful, and Johnson was pronounced dead. Meanwhile, Lloyd Clifford Love fled the scene, but he was arrested as he tried to drive away, thanks to a high-risk traffic stop by SWAT. According to the affidavit related to the man's case, investigators explained that the shooting occurred because Johnson accidentally made a typo in Lloyd's paycheck. Instead of writing Lloyd C. Love, he'd apparently written Lloyd K. Love, which made it impossible for him to cash in on his salary. Lloyd is currently being held without bond at the detention center in Arapahoe County. He refused to show up to court for his first advisement, so it had to be rescheduled, as reported by local station KDVR. At the moment, the case is ongoing.
Do you think workplaces should be allowed to impose policies against employees dating each other? Or are staff members' activities outside of work none of the company's business? Let us know your thoughts in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye.